probably know a lot more about Dick Beardsley than I do, since all of you have known him for years. He has an incredible story to tell, and he brought his guitar along, so I'm sure we are going to enjoy some tunes that are unique,
Yes.
one of a kind, and that Dick sings with his melodious voice, which will inspire all of us. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, and children of all ages, Dick Beardsley.
All right. Thank you, Rich. Man, I feel like I'm at the Dick Beardsley Marathon Running Camp. Honest to gosh. Seriously, 99% of you are part of our camp. So now, I know it's been tough finding a seat here, so just, take your time. And, well, golly, thank you for coming out. And this is like my extended family out here, that's for sure. And for those of you who aren't part of that extended family, we welcome you here. And like Rich was saying, tomorrow's really looking a lot better as far as for the race. At least the latest I looked, from about 6 in the morning till about at least noon, there's like a less than 25% chance of rain, and the wind's supposed to be lighter. I think even as early as or late as yesterday, they were talking about, heavy rain and winds gusting to over 40 miles an hour. So it looks like if it's gonna come, it's gonna be later tomorrow, like late tomorrow. So nice little window there, which is really, really good. Well, I've first came here to Napa 29 years ago. 29 years ago, I came here, and it's hard to believe it's been that many years already. And then I had a little hiatus, and then I came back in 1997. I was invited back by Rich and by Dave, and I've been very fortunate to be back every year. So this is my 19th year. So I've told all my stories, inside, outside, upside down, and you name it. And then I started adding my guitar a little bit. And as you'll find out, I'm not a very good guitar player and not a real good singer either. But like I've always told people, whether it be running a marathon, your work, your relationship with your family, it's all about the effort. And as long as you give it a good effort, and I promise you I will give it a good effort, then you can hold your head high and be happy with that. But what I thought about today to talk about is just some of the things that inspire me. We all need to be inspired every once in a while. Some of us need to be inspired to get out the door, to go for a run. Others need to be inspired to go to work in the morning. Others need to be inspired perhaps just to get up in the morning. But just some observations, things that have inspired me. Some of them have to do with running, other things nothing at all. But one of the things that recently inspired me was yesterday morning. I got up early. I'm an early riser, and I got up and I went for a run here in Napa. And I remember last year when I was here, I found this trail that kind of goes through town. It's a paved trail. And I thought, well, I'll run down that. So I get running down through there, and it's dark, but it's slowly starting to get light. And I look up ahead, and I see a gentleman that has an old, dilapidated bike. And he's got an old trailer that he's pulling behind it. It says, "God bless you," on the back of it. And I met him up at the end of the trail, and I didn't know where to go. And so as I went by him, I said, "Hey, good morning." He said, "Hey, good morning. God bless you." And I got to the end of the trail there, and I turned back, and he was right there. And I said, "Sir," I said, "I really don't know where to go from here." I said, "I'm trying to catch the other part of the trail." And he was the nicest, most down-to-earth person that I've met in a long, long time. And he had all of his life's possessions in that little cart. I'm sure he was a homeless man, but he smiled. He gave me directions. He told me I looked good when I was running. Not many people tell me that anymore. And as I left, he says, "God bless you and have a nice day." You talk about what a way to start a morning. This guy did not have to do that. He was happy, and that was really, for me, something to see. When I look back to what else inspired me to maybe perhaps running, I know Frank just walked out the door, but I remember in 1972, I hadn't taken a step running at all yet. Maybe chasing a few cows that got through the fences, but that was about it. But no organized running at all. And I remember seeing Frank Shorter coming into that Olympic Stadium in Munich running around the track and winning the gold medal. And I thought, wow, that was absolutely amazing. That inspired me because the following year then, I went out for running. I wasn't very good. Thoughts of ever doing what Frank Schurter did and entering an Olympic stadium, knowing I was going to win the gold medal, never even crossed my mind. But I was falling in love with that sport we call running. And then in 1975, I was a senior in high school. And I remember not seeing it, but I remember reading in the paper about Bill Rogers. And at that point, Bill Rogers was kind of my mentor, if you want to say, even though I'd never met him before. But he was like my idol. If I was a little kid playing Little League Baseball, Bill was like my Mickey Mantle. And I remember reading about Bill winning the 1975 Boston Marathon, where he set an American record, ran 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 55 seconds. And I thought, wow, to be able to run the Boston Marathon the Boston Marathon someday, wouldn't that be something? No doubt that inspired me with Frank and then seeing Bill. And then 7 years later, I was fortunate to be able to run the 1982 Boston Marathon. And it was a warm day, and it was cloudless, and everybody got a sunburn, and it was zillions of people lining the streets, no fencing to keep the crowds back, the noise, everything was just absolutely amazing. And I remember when I got to the start of the hills at 17 miles, and it was just me and some unknown runner named Alberto, and we hit those hills. And I tried to break away from Alberto on every hill, and I just couldn't do it. And then we get to the base of Heartbreak Hill, that long, infamous hill. And I remember going up that hill, and I was hurting, and I'm trying to shake Alberto, but he will not shake. And about 3/4 of the way up that hill, I looked up ahead, and I could see one of the wheelchair athletes. Now, this is 1982. The wheelchairs that they raced in back in those days, honestly, it looks like they just wheeled them out of the local hospital. They did not look like anything like they race in now. And I see this guy cranking up this hill. And I'm thinking, my gosh, if he misses one stroke, all it would take is if he missed one stroke, he's going right back to the bottom. And he was off to my left. And I remember zigging over that way and patting him on the back. Now, this is 3/4 of the way up Heartbreak. I pat him on the back and say, good job, buddy. I'm telling you, that inspired me for the rest of the race. Because after that, after I got off of Heartbreak Hill and came down the other side and got to the bottom, I could not feel my legs anymore. And I remember thinking of a lot of things. But one of the things that I look back that kept me going was that guy going up Heartbreak Hill and that old hospital wheelchair. That inspired me. So you never know what's going to inspire you. I never know what's going to inspire me. When I wake up in the morning, it's kind of fun to think and to wonder, what will inspire me today? When I walked in the room, and then last night I saw him, my good friend John Keston sitting in the back there. John is in his early 90s now. He's been coming here to Napa, I think, him and his wife Ann, as long as I've been coming here. John didn't even start running until, how old were you, John, when you started running? Where's John? Is he here? Oh, he had to step out. I thought he was still, I can't see with those lights shining on me like they are. But anyhow, John started running late in his life. At age 70, he just missed breaking 3 hours in the marathon by like 20 seconds. He continued to set world records well up into his 80s. And I think if he ever decided to tackle the marathon again, he'd probably set a world record also doing that. I look at my age, I'll be 60 in a couple of weeks. And I look to John, who's still very active. Maybe doesn't run as much as he used to, but still him and his wife Ann, still very, very active. That inspires me to want to be like John. Not like Mike. I want to be like Mike. I want to be like John. And boy, that guy still at age 91 or 92, whatever it is, he's the one that you'll hear tomorrow morning up at that starting line singing the Star Spangled Banner. And it will bring chills to the back of your spine, that's for sure. You know, another person, what's that? With a British accent, that's right. The person I never thought would inspire me is my oldest stepson, Christopher. Christopher's a great kid. He's really, really smart, but he's a couch potato. He's never liked athletics. He's never done anything. Well, a year ago, my wife Jill and I, along with Christopher, were invited back to the London Marathon. I was fortunate to win, along with a guy named Inga Simonson. We tied the very first London Marathon in 1981. So they brought us back, and they invited Jill, and the other boys couldn't go at the time. But Christopher, when he found out about 4 months before we're going to travel over to London that he could go, he said, well, I'm going to run the marathon with Mom. I said, okay. So I drove up to Waco, Texas. I'm living in Austin right now for a little bit more. Drove up to Waco where he was going to school at Baylor. Brought him to a running store, bought him a good pair of New Balance running shoes. Tried to lay out a little bit of a plan for him. And honest to goodness, I do not think in the 4 months he had to get ready, I honestly don't think he ran more than 10 times total. Total. I remember it was a year ago right now because he just got back from school for spring break. He was home. I thought, good deal. Well, I'll go for a run with him. Well, heck, he was up half the night playing video games. He slept until 1 o'clock in the afternoon and never ran a step. So I'm trying to talk him out of it. Well, the more I tried to talk him out of it, of course, the more he's going to show old stepdad Dick that I'm going to run the London Marathon. So we finally get to London, and I go, and me and Inga, we start the race, shoot the guns off, and Jill and Christopher, along with 45,000 other people, take off, and they take me and Inga back to the finish line, and then I jump in a taxi and take it back to the halfway point. I'm going to wait and watch them come by. So I waited and waited, and pretty soon, here they come. They're about 2 hours and 40 minutes coming through halfway, and they're both still running. I'm thinking, this is awesome. They're looking good. So then I cut the course and got across kitty corner, and I got to the 21-mile point. Now, back over in London, except for the elite, so many people over there wear costumes. I think I counted 17 giraffes running the London Marathon that particular morning. My wife Jill was dressed up like Cinderella in a full Cinderella dress with a big scoop, skirt and hoop skirt. So anyhow, they were running amongst some of these giraffes. So pretty soon, I'm at the 21-mile point, and I'm waiting. I see, here comes a giraffe. Here comes another giraffe, along with a number of other things that people all dressed up. But no Jill or no Christopher. And I'm waiting. I'm thinking, did they take a wrong turn? Did I miss them? How could this be? Well, finally, I see Miss Cinderella coming down the road, and they're power walking. So I go, hey, hon, I'm over here. So they come over, and at this point, Christopher's no longer smiling, but he is still upright. And she goes, Christopher started cramping at about 18 miles, but he's determined to finish. So I'll give him a lot of credit. They power walked it the rest of the way, and he finished in 6 hours and about 6 minutes. But he finished. So we got back to the hotel, and they had Jill and I staying on, like, say, the second floor. They had Christopher in a room on the third floor. So I said, hon, why don't we just order room service so we don't have to go out, and find something to eat. We'll just do it up in Christopher's room. So she said, yeah, that sounds good. So we told Christopher that, and about an hour later, we go up to his room. We knock on the door. Knock, and nobody comes. I'm thinking, well, golly, we just talked to him not long ago. Surely he couldn't fall asleep yet. I'm knocking again. I'm thinking, am I at the right room? And then all of a sudden, something caught my eye, and I look down, and I see this little plastic key sliding underneath the door. So I reach down and I pick it up and I put it in. And it took me a while to get the door open because he had to crawl away from it, and it took him a while. And he couldn't stand up. So he crawled back over to his little perch on the floor. We ordered room service, and honest to goodness, he could not get up to eat. He had to eat it like a dog on the floor. Finally, Jill and I lifted him up into bed. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, this is what you get for only running 10 times. And then even more so, I felt even had a little more of a smile on my face because the next morning then we had to be on a flight for 11 hours back to the United States. But you know what? In the long run, he inspired me. Because I'm thinking, you know what, and he was only 19 at the time, so he's young, he's ambitious, he's a little foolhardy, but at that age, you can get away with things like that. But I give him a lot of credit. That inspires me to this day, that he was able to do that on so little bit of training. I got to tell you about a group of kids that really inspired me. So in 1982 was Boston. Shortly after Boston, I had some major Achilles tendon problems. I mean, major. The U.S. Olympic doctor at the time operated on me, rebuilt me a new tendon, said, it's not looking good for the 84 Olympics. And for me, that would have been my best shot at it. And I thought, okay, but I'm going to work hard at it. Well, I got cards and letters from people and said, gosh, we've been hearing about it in the newspaper, blah, blah, blah. And gosh, we keep reading that the doctors say you're probably never going to be able to run at that level again. Well, I never believed it, but pretty soon, after you hear something over and over and over, you start to believe it. And pretty soon I started to believe, you know what, they're probably right. I'm probably never, ever going to run that fast again. I'll probably never even have a chance at the Olympics again. And I started feeling, for the first time in my life, a little sorry for myself. I then got a phone call from a race director in Chicago, Illinois, that was putting on a 10K race, and he wanted me to come down and speak and maybe run it. So he called me up, and he's all excited. He says, oh, Dick, gosh, you ran 208 at Boston, and listen, we'd love to have you come to our race, maybe, sign a few autographs, do a little talk, run if you want. How would you like to come down? I said, nope. I said, I can't. I blew up my Achilles, and I'm not into running anymore. Well, thankfully, this guy had a good positive attitude. He says, you know what, Dick? I'm sorry to hear about that. I'm sure you'll get back running again, but listen, we'd still love to have you come down. And I came that close to hanging the phone up on him. And I thought, you know what, maybe it would be good. Kind of get off the farm and go down there and just kind of get my mind off of it. So I agreed to. So 2 weeks later, I jumped on a plane, flew into Chicago. The gentleman picked me up, and we're going into downtown. And he asked me, he says, Dick, New Balance sent us a bunch of posters of you and Alberto running that race at Boston. Would you mind stopping at one of the children's hospitals here and maybe signing a few posters for the kids? I said, no, I'd love to do that. I said, I've done that in the past before in Minnesota. I'd love to do that. So we pull into this hospital, we get out with the posters, and we go in and we go up to the second floor, and when we get off the elevator, there's a person from the hospital there to greet us. We shook hands, and he says, Dick, I just want to let you know a little bit about the kids you're going to go see. He said they range in age from about 7 to 12, and most of them, if not all of them, are terminally ill. Man, I started shaking, my knees cracking against each other. I started getting all sweaty on my palms. I thought to myself, gosh, I've talked to a lot of kids, but never to a bunch of kids that are terminally ill. I thought, what am I going to say to them? Part of me just wanted to turn around and walk away, but I kind of composed myself, and I remember walking into this large hospital room. I don't know if they still do it like this anymore, probably not, but it was a large room, and around that room were about 8 or 10 beds. All of them had some little kids in them. 2 or 3 of the beds had these plastic tents over them, pumping oxygen into their little environment so they could breathe better. I went in there and I signed posters for these kids. I shook their hands. They had no idea who Dick Beardsley was. Not a clue. But they were so fired up because I wasn't somebody that was going to come in there and put another tube down their throat or stick another needle in their hinder. I spent about 45 of the most glorious minutes of my life with those kids, and then it was time for me to leave. And as I was leaving, all the kids that could started clapping. And I remember turning around, and the tears were just streaming down my cheeks. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, look at these kids. Many of them don't know that they're even dying. Some of them might not even be here tomorrow. And I remember thinking to myself, as I had tears of sadness running down my cheeks, tears of joy because of what I saw, the life in these young kids that were all dying. And I had tears of shame because here I was feeling a little sorry for myself because I had a little sore Achilles and I might never ever be able to run a marathon fast again. And I remember promising myself right then and there that never, ever again will I ever, ever let myself feel sorry for myself again. And I never have. And I saw those kids 34 years ago. I think of them very often. Many, if not all those kids, perhaps may not even be with us anymore. But you talk about a group of young kids that inspired me, and as I look back, have helped me through difficult times in my life, were those young kids, and they didn't even know that's what they were doing. How many of you get inspired by animals? I get inspired by animals. I'm an animal lover. My dog, Sam. I remember back in the, I think, early 80s, I walked out of my house one morning to go out to the barn to milk our cows, and there was my dog, Sam. She never slept on the front steps, but for some reason when I opened that door, she was on those steps. And her left leg was almost completely shot off. Somebody, she used to love in the summertime laying on this little knoll outside of our home on the farm along the gravel road, because in the summertime the breeze would blow in there and it would cool her off. Somebody must have gone by, a bunch of kids in the back of a truck or something, I'm not sure, but shot her with a shotgun. Her left shoulder was basically blown away. But when I walked out that door, her little tail was going like this. It was wagging. She looked at me and she said, "You know what? I'm a little hurt right now, but it's so good to see you." And I remember taking her to the vet, and they were able to save her leg, but for the next 6 months, she had a steel rod sticking about 6 inches out of her leg, and we finally got that pulled out, but when she walked, she always walked like this. But she still would go out and try to run. She was the dog I had. Back in my day when I was running 140 miles a week, she went on every run with me. If I ran 25 miles, she probably ran closer to 30 because she'd see a rabbit or a squirrel or a deer, and off through the woods she'd go. But eventually she'd catch back up to me again. And now when I would put on my shoes and go out for a run, she could run for about a mile, and then her leg just wouldn't let her go anymore, and she'd go and lay over in the ditch and wait for me to come back. And then we'd run the last mile back home together. That inspired me. So as you can see, I've been inspired in my life by a lot of things, whether it be nature, whether it be an animal, whether it be people. But I got to tell you what has always inspired me the most. So my first wife, Mary, and I, got married young. We wanted to have a bunch of kids, and unfortunately we couldn't. We thought it was me, that I was running too much, so the little guys weren't swimming the right direction or whatever. But I got checked out, and I was A-okay. Mary had some problems, and they couldn't figure it out, but we thought, well, gosh, maybe we can adopt a child. So one day our veterinarian was out at the farm, and we got to chat, and he says, well, gosh, Dick, the neighbors up the road, they just adopted a little baby from Chile. It didn't take him very long to get it. He gave me the name of the adoption agency down in the Twin Cities, so we called them up, and we went and filled out an application. They came up to the farm, did a home study, and pretty soon, about 6 months, we had a phone call. "Yeah, hey, Beardsley, this is so-and-so, and there's a little boy in Honduras. He's about 16 months old. Would you like to adopt him?" Oh my gosh, we start crying. Of course we will. And then at the very end, she goes, "But there's a couple that's in front of you that has first dibs." Thinking, well, what are we going to pick up a puppy at a puppy mill or what? Well, they finally called back a couple days later and said they're going to pass. So man, we were so excited. So we boarded a plane. We flew into Tegucigalpa. The lawyer that we had to hire picked us up, and we went and picked up little Frankie was his original name. Little Frankie was about 16 months old, but he was so malnourished, he couldn't even sit up, let alone stand up. His skin was all jaundiced. He had a big stomach because it was full of worms. There was a hospital strike going on, but the lawyer knew a doctor friend. He came to our hotel, gave little Frankie some medicine, and we just needed to wait for the paperwork to get done. And then, unfortunately, Mary came down with meningitis real bad. And then we had to get back to the U.S., and they would not let us take little Frankie, who now we called little Andrew, back home with us. We tried. We called Minnesota senators, and they tried, but they would not release Andy. So our lawyer knew a friend that had a grandmother that lived on the top of this mountain that took care of a bunch of little kids that were her daughters, and she said she would watch Andy for as long as it took for us to get back. So myself, because Mary was still sick, and she was at the hotel, just waiting for the next day to get back to the U.S. So I traveled up this mountain road to the very top of the mountain with the lawyer and little Andy in my lap, and I took him in, and I met this older grandmother, and she says, "I will," in broken English, "I will take good care of your son Andy." And I gave him a big hug, and the next morning we were on the plane back to the U.S., and Mary was in a hospital in Memphis for a week, and they got that cleared up. I was back at the farm, and they kept telling us, "Oh, you're going to have Andrew back by Thanksgiving." This is October. "You're going to have him back by Thanksgiving. All the paperwork will be done." Well, Thanksgiving came and gone. And they said, "Oh, you're going to have him back by Christmas. You will have him back by Christmas." Well, on Christmas, the day after Christmas, there was still a stack of presents under the tree with Andy's name on it, but no Andy. "You will have him back by January 1st. Still no January 1st. Finally, on January 16th, I boarded a plane, flew to Tegucigalpa. The lawyer picked me up again, and we drove up this big mountain. It had been almost 3 months since I'd seen Andy. We'd had him for 2 weeks before we had to go back to the States. I was so nervous. I thought, he's not going to recognize me. He's not going to know who I am. So I walk into this house, and the old lady came up to me, and she says, "Oh, my daughter is changing Andy's diaper in the living room on the couch." My heart was beating 100 miles an hour, and I walked into the living room, and little Andy was laying on his back. And he looked up, and he put his arms up, and he goes, "Papa." And I thought, my God, he remembered. So we got him home, and everybody was so excited, and my parents were there waving American flags, and we finally had a family now, but we knew fairly quickly that something wasn't quite right with our son Andy. So we took him to the doctor, and they suggested us taking him to the cities, to the Minneapolis Children's Hospital. Long story short, he came back with about every label you could put on a young person. ADHD, oppositional defiance syndrome, Asperger's disease, bipolar, you name it, he had it. And it was a struggle. Over the years, doctors and other professionals said your son really needs to be institutionalized, and not once did Mary or I ever have that cross our mind. That was the last thing that we were going to do. And as he got a little older, and it was difficult, and there were times for his own good and for our good, we had to put him in to the Children's Psychiatric Hospital in Fargo, North Dakota, for a period of time, just so they could figure things out. And then he was in special ed all the time, but he finally got out of special ed. They mainstreamed him, and he graduated from Detroit Lakes, Minnesota High School. But then he didn't know what to do. All of a sudden, here he was in school. Now all of a sudden, he had nothing to do, and it was not good. Being from a small town, I knew pretty much everybody, and everybody of my friends that had a business there, we tried to give him a job. He never lasted more than a month or two, and he would quit for some reason or another. He would stay up half the night, sleep most of the day. He ate Whoppers and McDonald's. He was heavy and lethargic. And then one day, he got up, and I don't know if he was just sick and tired of being sick and tired, but he says, "Pop, I think I might join the Army." And I thought, you know what, Andrew? That might be the best thing for you. So he went down to the little recruiting place in our town. He came back, and he was so excited. I hadn't seen that much excitement in his face in a long, long time. He says, "Pop, I joined the Army." He says, "You got to help me, though. I'm leaving for Fort Leonard Wood in 6 weeks for basic training, and I need to get in shape." So he cut out all of his burgers. I started him on a little walking program, and about 6 weeks later, I took him to Fargo, North Dakota. I dropped him off because the next morning, him and some other recruits were taking a bus from Fargo to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I gave him a big hug. I told him how much I loved him and how proud I was of him. And he called me about 2 hours later. He says, "Pop, you're never going to believe what I'm doing right now." I said, "No, you're probably right. What are you doing?" He says, "Well, my recruiting sergeant didn't know if I was going to make the tape or not." He said, "I might be a little bit close on body fat and whatnot." So he says, he went to the drugstore. He says, "Right now I'm laying in bed." And he bought a big thing of Preparation H, and he rubbed it all over my stomach, and then he wrapped me in saran wrap. And he's hoping that by morning it'll shrink things up a little bit. Sure enough, the next morning he called me and says, "Pop, I passed the tape test, and I'm on my way to Fort Leonard Wood." So he gets to Fort Leonard Wood. 3 days later, I get a phone call from his drill sergeant. He says, "Mr. Beardsley, are you going to be home for the next few days?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Why?" He says, "I really don't think Andrew's going to make it through basic training." I said, "Well, okay, I'll be here." I didn't hear anything from Andrew until 5 weeks later. I got a phone call. It was Andy. He says, "Pop, I only got 2 minutes to call to be able to talk to you." But he says, "Pop, I love it." And I could hear the excitement in his voice and the enthusiasm that I hadn't heard in years. He says, "Pop, I absolutely love it. I can't wait for you and Mom and Grandma to come down for my graduation." And 4 weeks later, after he'd been there for 9 weeks, we drove down to Fort Leonard Wood, and we were sitting in a large auditorium with other parents. And pretty soon, about 300 recruits come marching in their Class A uniforms. And everybody in that place was crying, and I was probably crying the best, or the hardest. And then afterwards, they let them out, and they marched back in their platoons back to their barracks, and then their drill sergeants let them go, and they came and could talk to the parents. And he was a completely different kid. He wasn't a kid anymore. He was a man. And his drill sergeant took me aside, and he says, "I honestly did not think your son Andrew would make it through." But he said he was our number one soldier for his platoon. He so loved to serve his country. And then he got deployed and spent a year in Iraq. He got back, and when he got back, I could tell something wasn't quite right, because now all of a sudden things kind of reminded me of back when he was younger. He started fighting those demons again, and he was suffering from PTSD, something he didn't like to talk about. He was afraid of the night. He had to sleep with a light on. But I was so proud of him. And he moved back to Detroit Lakes when he got out of the Army. He got his own apartment. He got a job that he held down. He was back with his friends, back where he grew up. He was happy. Still fighting some of those demons, but he seemed to be doing so well. Then October 3rd, just this past October 3rd, he called me. He says, Pop, I just got my stationary bike. It came in the mail. He says, I just put it together. And he says, now I don't have to run outside in the wintertime. And he says, Pop, I just got off it. He says, I got to tell you about it. He says, when I first started pedaling, I didn't think it was too much, but at about 6 minutes, my palms started to sweat a little bit. At 10 minutes, I started dripping down the sides of my face. At 18 minutes, my head got all wet. And at 20 minutes, I could hardly wait to stop. But he said it was so awesome. He says, I can't wait for you to see it. And I said, Andrew, I can't wait to see it either. Okay, Pop, I got to go. I love you. I love you too, Andrew. So I'm going to finish out this story of this young man that has inspired me for so long with a song. Oh, my hands never sweat when I'm playing in my bathroom at home. Jeepers. It's called A Day I'll Never Forget. I'll do my best. October 4th is a day that I'll try again. If I have to walk away, I'm just going to have to walk away. October 4th is a day that I'll never forget. The police showed up on our front door steps. They said, sir, your son, he took his life. I had tears in my eyes when I looked at my wife. You know, the Lord, he giveth, the Lord, he taketh away. But believe in him just like you should. He is great, he is good. You know the Lord, he giveth, the Lord, he taketh away. October 10th, we gathered at First Lutheran Church to share our love, to show what his life was worth. We cried and we laughed, we sang some songs, everybody there tried to be strong. You know the Lord, he giveth, the Lord, he taketh away. Believe in him just like you should. He is great, he is good. You know the Lord, he giveth, the Lord, he taketh away. October 12th, we laid our boy. October 12th, we laid our boy to rest. Next to Grandpa Ed, they were best of friends. Then we laid our son into the ground with family and friends all around. You know the Lord, he giveth, the Lord, he taketh away. But
but believe in him just like you should. He is great, he is good. You know the Lord he giveth, the Lord he taketh away. So that song I wrote maybe a month after Andy passed, and it just seems to help me cope with that. But I'd like to play a song that I sang for him at his funeral, that I wrote and sang for him at his funeral. It's called Andrew John. I would love to hold our Druzy boy once again, remembering back to all the things that we did. He could make us laugh, he could make us cry, he could make us mad. We loved him so, you know we are his mom and dad. He'd put his seat so far back he could barely see over his dash, driving down the street in his 98 Cadillac. He loved that car as much as he loved me and his mom. That's our boy, our precious, sweet little Andrew John. We will honor our son with these words I've wrote down. Long as we all remember, he'll always be around. The pain of losing him cuts like a fillet knife. He's now with our Lord up in heaven's heights. The best run I ever had was with my lad. He always called me Pop, it was never Dad. Running with him beneath that big Montana sky was the best run I ever had in all my life. And when he died, Pastor Dave said he's a lucky one. He's walking hand in hand with God's only Son. Our faith and common sense tells us our pastor's right, but I would love to hold our Andrew John just one more time. We will honor our son with these words I wrote down. Long as we all remember, he'll always be around. The pain of losing him cuts like a fillet knife. He's now with our Lord up in heaven's heights. Andrew John, you always thanked us for having your back. We always did, we always will, that's a fact. And when we look to heaven way up above, know we're looking up to you and sending all our love. So rest our little boy. So rest our little boy, you're now at peace. No more bad thoughts, those bad dreams. No more darkness, no sadness, there'll be only light. But how your mom and I would love to hold you one more time. We will honor our son with these words I wrote down. Long as we all remember, he'll always be around. The pain of losing him cuts like a fillet knife. He's now with our Lord up in heaven's heights. The pain of losing him cuts like a fillet knife. How we'd love to hold our Andrew John just one more time. And please, don't feel sorry for me or my family. As much as I miss him and will miss him every day of my life, it also brings me great joy to know that he's in a better place, to know that all those demons, all that darkness is gone. And he will inspire me as he did from a young boy to almost his 32nd birthday for the rest of my life. So tomorrow, folks, go out there, give it a great shot. When you cross that finish line and you know you gave it your best effort, hold your head high and have a smile on your face. Thanks, everybody. Take care, and God bless you. Oh, thank you.